Greetings, humans. Greetings, and welcome back to another fun-filled episode. Bear here, 29-year veteran of the woods, and today, we've got a little bit of a story out of bounding into comics here. Yes, indeed, it is, the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, director James Gunn shares his number one reason for the deteriorating quality of feature films. Yes, indeed. And you know what? Bear is not a sort of huge fan of Mr. Gunn out there. What a terrible name, by the way. What a terrible name, naming yourself Gunn. I'm not the biggest fan out there with some of the shenanigans that went on with the last film there, but that's a whole other bag of stuff out there, so let's not get into that. Spencer McCooley, I hope I'm pronouncing that last name. Bear always has trouble with that. Sorry about that, Spencer. That Hollywood's quality is in the metaphorical toilet, he says, compared to years past, is an undeniable fact at this point. And story director James Gunn has an opinion on the number one reason for this decline. Apparently it's John Cena. We all knew that, people. John Cena taking us down. Just go back to China over there and speak in your Mandarin, sir. Speak in your Mandarin. Yes, indeed. Anyways, not a huge fan of James Gunn, but I tell you what, when somebody's right, we try and put a spotlight on that. So let's go ahead and get right on into it here. Let's see, the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy and Suicide Squad Helmer shared his thoughts on a topic while answering a recent round of fan questions via his personal Twitter. The impromptu Q&A session kicked off on August 26th when user Adam Hughes of Matt, very odd, asked the director for insight into his creative process on the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 and Volume 2, particularly in regard to whether he, quote, wrote this story first with the soundtrack already picked in your mind, or the other way around, and the story helped pick these specific songs. And he goes on, Mr. Gunn says, Mr. Gunn, story always comes first, / takes priority. He says, I choose songs accordingly to fit the scene from a master list of songs I've created in the specific genre that fits the project. I never did get a song for Guardians. Never didn't, rather, get a song for Guardians. So, yeah, very cool. It's kind of interesting that he talks about having kind of a master list of songs there and kind of brings it down just a little bit. Syncing music with a movie or, a video of some kind out there isn't always easy. You can have a nice master list of songs out there, but then of course you've got to get into, copyright issues, whether or not the film budget can afford that sort of stuff. Sometimes you've got artists out there that don't want to work with other artists, whole sorts of stuff out there. So a lot of times maybe it's very interesting that he had this master list of songs there, and then kind of narrowed it down, kind of, a little bit like what he does there with a mixtape, as it were, there. So very interesting indeed. So we had another question out there in his Q&A from a gentleman called Andrew Gordon McPherson with a check mark, people. He's got a check mark. He's a special person out there. This is just a theory, he asked, but do you ever have trouble finding a good temp score or a sync song while editing? And if so, do you think that could be an indicator something isn't working in a scene, or in the scene? A sync song or a temp song is basically what it sounds like. It's just kind of a more generic version of whatever song you might be putting in there, just so you're getting the tempo right or something. And Mr. Gunn goes on, he says, the answer to your first question, finding a good temp score, is all the time. The answer to your second question is no. Many times, scenes are very tonally specific to themselves, so it makes it difficult to find a good temp. That doesn't mean there's a problem with the scene. A good composer can smooth all of that out. Again, he kind of talks about this. Scenes are a little bit like mini movies. Trying to tie them together is really a key there, especially with music. The scene itself, it might take a sort of theme. Let's just call it a country western theme. And then your next scene, it might have sort of more of a sort of a urban hip hop sort of vibe to it. So how do you kind of mix those together as a mixtape? How do you mix those scenes together where they're not tonally, unless you want it to be tonally jarring, so they're not tonally jarring between each other out there. That's kind of a key. He's talking about the what does he call that? The temp score there. So before you bring in your copyright music there, kind of a temp there to kind of see how it goes and kind of how it feels out there. So yeah, he has that problem. Many people do. Many people do out there. But very interesting. Very interesting there. So he goes on. Another question from Mr. Rebo out there. So Mr. Rebo asks, why don't studios or directors hire composers to make music before editing? And this is very interesting what he talks about here. He says, if you saw how disorganized most productions are and how unfinished most scripts are on big movies as they start shooting, the number one reason for the deteriorating quality of feature films, in his opinion, you would see why this isn't an option out there. Well, very much. That is very true. Bear totally agrees with that. You can have unfinished stuff. A number of different reasons why. A time crunch out there. A lot of times, some of these big tentpole movies have a specific date that they need to come out and be released on. So, for example, like it needs to be released on Memorial Day weekend or something like that. So they might have it maybe a year or two back. Oh, we're going to pick Memorial Day weekend to bring out the movie. Well, it might, I mean, there could be a whole number of reasons why it might not be feasible to come out on that specific date, but they gotta hit that date. So a lot of that stuff that might be a little bit more polished, a little bit more production worthy, ends up getting rushed. It ends up, as he says, being unfinished out there. So again, that is a lot of people talk about the wokeness and the SJWs, and yes, that all is bad, very terrible. We shouldn't have that in movies, but a lot of times it's just really essentially laziness out there. And we'll get into that here in just a second. But I tell you what, kind of the flip side of some of that might be some of the movies that were either made right before or right during the pandemic time. So they weren't having the movie theaters open. So those movies might have had a specific date, in 2020 or 2021 out there. They couldn't hit it because there were no theaters open for anybody to go see. So they kind of held off. I'm thinking of some of the films like Top Gun 2, the latest James Bond movie, even the Batman out there. A lot of those got delayed. Well, actually, that ended up being a good thing because they actually could put a little bit more polish on there, kind of check out some of the scenes. Did this scene fit exactly with the other scene that we wanted it to? Could we peel off a couple frames here or there and kind of smash it together, make it look a little bit better? They might not have had that time if they had to have a specific date that they had to hit or something like that. So a lot of times being a little bit more generous with the production time actually turns out to... Top Gun 2 is a perfect example out there. Passed over, what was it, the Avengers movie just the other day. So good on them. Good on them. All right, they go on out there with... Gak, the big ugly gamer out there apparently, and he says the second reason being those meddling kids. He says in parentheses, studio executives out there. James Gunn says, I'd say after shooting with unfinished scripts, unprepared directors are the number 2 issue. It aggravates me to no end that so many directors, not most but many, squander people's time, money, and talent by walking onto a set not knowing where they're going to put the camera. Yes, indeed, I would say that is probably a great reason why. A lot of times you have maybe not very experienced directors, but in their mind, in their own head, they have this elevated status of themselves, and, kind of walking onto the set, and, as long as I'm here on the set, everything's gonna go according to plan. Well, no, not really. You really gotta plan, you really gotta have all those meetings between all your different staffs out there, all your different production heads and whatnot, and make sure everybody's on the same page. You are They like to say the auteur out there, you are the one as a director out there. You are the one that's in charge of pretty much everything. You're also the one to be blamed as well, but you're the one that's in charge of everything out there. So you have to be on the top of your game out there. A lot of times they actually hire new or unexperienced directors out there, not only because they're cheap, number one, but also cheap as far as hiring them goes, but also cheap as well as like on a big movie, something like this, the royalties and all the extras along there with that. Think of George Lucas out there with the toys that he got. Man, George Lucas made more money off of toys than he ever did off of movies out there. So a lot of times the corporations or companies just want to cut those people out so they get all the money instead. So that would be another reason why they hire a lot of these unexperienced directors out there. You really have to have somebody with a lot of, number one, as he talks about here, competence and as well as collaboration out there with the different people out there. So very much James Gunn on point here with his criticisms. Yes, indeed. Moving on, he also says, directing is a privilege. We are so lucky to do it, and there are so many talented people who want to do it. Seeing directors who aren't grateful for that opportunity and respectful towards the talent and hard work of those around them pisses him off to no end. And that's true. That's true. There are a lot of other people involved in filmmaking. A lot of people kind of assume that it's all, high class, white collar. Not really. A lot of stuff is very blue collar. Your stage hands, your drivers, even the people that go and get the coffee, production assistants and all that stuff. A lot of those people work really, really, really hard. And it kind of, to quote James Gunn here, pisses Bear off a lot of times when some of the complainers out there with some of the movies, we need to just burn Hollywood down and everything. Well, there's a lot of very good, hard-working people out there that are making some money in movies that don't have anything to do with the SJW woke agenda out there. And getting rid of some of those people might not be in the best interest of making great movies out there. So he goes on answering his last question on the subject for the time being, where I'm just going to go with a Bodicio. I'm just going to go with that. Does a production need to be rigid, though? Perhaps a more collaborative process makes a good film, he asks. You've spoken of storyboarding everything as I recall. And Mr. Gunn says, no, different films have different vibes. That's very true. It's very true. You could have, a superhero film have a completely different vibe than, a romantic comedy, for example. I personally am looser than I used to be, he says. I often change stuff on the set, which was heretical to me around volume 1 time, but preparation takes many. By the way, you can kind of read into that as you were. A lot of people kind of complain that the volume 2 might not have been as good as volume 1 out there, so read into that as you will. He says, but preparation takes many forms. You can be loose, but prepared, rather. There's a difference between that and not giving a flying you-know-what out there. Yes, indeed. So, very good. Very good indeed. Bear would also say, a part of being prepared out there, let's just say you wanted to have a scene between two characters and it's at sunset or something like that. You get to this, either to the set that day or to your outdoor location, probably be an outdoor location if it's sunset. You get to your outdoor location there and it's raining, or some other bad thing happens along the way, and you say, oh well, we had it prepared and everything, but we gotta go in a different direction here, so maybe you might have a little bit more of a narrower, more intimate scope with that instead of having kind of a big vista of a sunset. You just kind of keep it real close between the characters or something like that. You gotta be willing to be flexible with a lot of that stuff, where even the stuff that you prepared for might not go through, so you gotta say, okay, what's plan B, what's plan C, and that's also being prepared out there as well. So you can't just kind of come up to the set one day not prepared at all. Hopefully everybody else has all their stuff ready to go. And all you gotta do is just sit in that chair and you just say action and then cut, and then that's all you gotta. There's a lot more to being a director than just sitting in the chair looking at a monitor there. So yeah, very good. Once again, not a huge fan of Mr. Gunn out there. What a terrible last name, by the way. Not a huge fan out there, but when somebody is correct out there, we gotta shine a spotlight on that. So that's kind of an interesting take on why some of the movies out there, especially some of the very big budget movies out there, really aren't all that great, or as he kind of calls it here, deteriorating quality out there. Probably would agree with that. For example, with the Disney stuff here, probably have too many films coming out. I think they have, what is it, like 3 or 4 films a year plus all of their Marvel TV shows as well. So it just gets a little cluttered. You've getting people pulled in different directions where probably maybe one really good film, maybe 2 good films a year, Marvel-wise, would be probably the solution. There's probably a lot of burnout there as well, in addition to being deteriorating in quality. Yes, neat. All right, well, thank you, everybody. Bear, we want to bring this to everybody's attention out here. But you know what? Talking about people and also physical items that are guns has made Bear not only hungry, but also a little bit scared as well. So he's gonna head back into the woods. So until next time, people. Grrrrr. Humans, thank you for watching this video. If you wish to have more, please like and subscribe. And don't forget that bell for notification. It would please Bear very much. You don't want to see Bear bad, do you? Grrrr.